Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is noon, so I can say good afternoon. I hope you're all enjoying the elusive spring in Maine. It finally came. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Agnieszka Carpenter, and I'm the Executive Director for BioME. I'll be moderating today's panel. So we have four wonderful panelists today. You can see their faces here on the screen. I'll let each of them introduce themselves in a few moments. Before we begin the official event, I wanted to thank our event sponsors. All of these great organizations are helping us fulfill our mission, so thank you very much. I know some of you are here today. I will stop my share for now, or actually, let me go back to this. Okay. So today we are here to talk about the future of Maine's economy and the important role that life sciences will play if we give it a chance. The Maine life science sector is growing organically, but we feel that it maybe needs a little push. It needs centralized strategy. We've seen that work in other states. We've been having these conversations for many, many months and even years. So last fall, BioMaine, together with partners and the life science community, decided to put our heads together and actually propose a piece of legislation. And that legislation is now a printed bill, 1643. I will paste a link to that bill in the chat. And it assumes the establishment of the Life Science Innovation Center. And so today we're here to talk about why this strategy is needed, and we'll talk a little bit about other states and why this works in other states. And now these states are considered life science leaders nationally and globally. And we will have a Q&A at the end. So if anybody has questions for our panelists, please either leave them in the chat or you can save a question till the end. We'll have a Q&A session. You can also utilize the chat just to say hi or to comment on anything. I'm really hoping for some engaged audience here today. If we have any policymakers with us today, welcome. We appreciate your time. We know you're very, very busy right now. And this event is being recorded and will be distributed at a later date. I also, just for those of you who have been following the progress of this bill, wanted to tell you that today is an exciting day because the bill is in the hands of the Housing and Economic Development Committee. They will today decide on whether the bill will pass out of the committee. We had a public hearing last week that went very well. Thank you to all of you who showed up in person or submitted a written testimony. Okay, so now without further ado, I would like for our panelists to introduce themselves, and let's just go in the order that you can see on the screen. So Eileen will be first.
Hi, Agnieszka. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this very important panel. My name is Eileen Huang-Saad. I'm the Director of Life Sciences, Health, and Engineering Programs at Northeastern's Roux Institute.
Okay, thank you. Owen?
Great to see everyone. Owen McCarthy. I'm the co-founder and president of MedRhythms, and we build medical devices to help people improve their walking if they've had a stroke. I'm a deep Mainer. I'm originally from Patton, Maine, and I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Okay, thanks, Owen. Jerry?
Good morning. Thank you, Agnieszka. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jerry Bowers. I am the Vice President of External Affairs and Chief of Staff here at the Mount Desert Island Biological Laboratory in Bar Harbor. I have been working in Maine's life science sector for about 35 years and have just a real passion for creating more opportunity in life sciences for Mainers.
Thank you, Jerry. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Delmar. I serve as a life sciences consultant for Focus Maine, which is a private sector nonprofit that advances Maine's high potential industries, life sciences being one of them. And I've spent the last 14 years building innovation economies around the world and am excited to be back home in Maine. I'm in Down East Maine, and now focusing on how we can grow a more vibrant life sciences sector here in the state. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And we very carefully crafted the panel today to make sure we get different perspectives. And before we start the discussion, I actually just received a text. So is everybody excited? Okay, so Dana O'Brien, our consultant, part of our team in Augusta, wrote to me and said, unanimous vote in support of the bill. Yes, right on time. Thank you. Thank you to the committee. Of course, this is now, as I mentioned, going to go through the chambers, but step one is completed. I feel very fulfilled right now. So very timely. Okay, so I guess the question to everybody right now is, why do we need this center? We know that life sciences is growing in Maine. If you've ever seen the BioME industry report, we've been tracking all this data. We know there's been a lot of organic growth, 31% over the past 5 years. So someone might just look at it and say, well, why do we need any type of center? Why do we need a strategy? It's already growing. But we're also seeing that, compared to other states, we're lagging in a lot of different areas. So I'd like for you to maybe talk about that a little bit and give your unique perspective. Whoever wants to start. Eileen, I know you want to start.
Yeah, no, I mean, so right now I'm still so excited about what you just announced. I'm thinking about how far the community has come over the last 30, 40 years. Jerry, you've been in it the longest, and it's so exciting to just see how a group of organizations can come together and get something over the finish line. This is just the beginning, though. So the question is why do we need something? I think life sciences is a very complicated industry. It is a highly interdisciplinary effort, and it needs a lot of talent across sectors and across just individual disciplines. So the most amazing thing about what I see in Maine is the fact that we have that depth of talent. We just happen to be geographically dispersed across the state. And so when that happens, it's often very hard to know how do you connect with the relevant resources and information you need in real time to support an early stage company. We have done an incredible job, I think, over the last several years to really bring these things together in what I call an intentional network. We now have a Maine Life Sciences network on LinkedIn that's over 500 strong. We have an eco map so that people can mine where the different resources are. We have a organic timeline that shows how much investment the state has put into growing the life sciences sector. But if we want to get to the next level, we really need to think about how to coordinate this across organizations. And also, we need to work together to really bring an overall influx of capital into the state. And this is what this bill will help enable. And so I'm so excited to see what can happen in the next 10 years with this support.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Eileen.
Can I just jump in, Agnieszka? I would just say, wanting to build on what Eileen just said, because everything that she said is 100% accurate in terms of where we currently are and what lies ahead. I think it's also really important that we not miss this opportunity to sort of realize that what's happening in Maine certainly doesn't happen in isolation. And so to kind of connect what we're doing right now with what's happening on the national level will also be really important as we navigate the next few years. And I think now is maybe the most important time for us to think about how we come together to leverage what resources we have. This is the next few years, I think, will undoubtedly be a time where we really focus on gaining efficiencies and really building on our strengths and maybe reducing redundancy and all of those, key things. So this is really a pivotal moment, I think, for the state to maximize all that has been invested in the life science sector until this point and really just watch it take off. I'm really, really excited about where we are.
And if I could, I completely agree, Jerry and Eileen, with everything that's been said. And if I can build on that too, I think it's really important to remember that this is a game for global competitiveness. It's not just about Maine. And the people who are winning in this space, there's a tried and true playbook for how they're winning. And we can learn from those best practices and leverage them here in Maine. And it's very important to signal to the world that we are open for business and that we have a brand identity around the space here in Maine, and that and get really good at telling our story. I think sometimes we take a page from the New England School of Marketing, which is to do what we do really well and not tell anybody about it. And we have to get really good at getting that big signal out. And one of the things that these organizing groups do is help to signal to the broader world and all those investors that we want to bring into the state, and help us be more competitive to compete at federal level for funding and investment. Then no, Maine is serious about this. We're committed to this, and that this is a place where life sciences is going to have a bright future. So I'd like to keep that in mind too.
It's interesting to connect there. We started Med Rhythms in Boston and moved it here 6 months later, and we moved it here in 2018. And when we went out to raise venture capital, everyone in the venture capital world was like, "Okay, what are you doing in Maine?" And our answer was basically like, "Well, we want to be here, and we're going to build a great business, and like we'll figure it out, right?" Like there was not a strong answer. And then fast forward to the Rue Institute showing up, and the fact that there's an investment at the intersection of AI and life science, and talent was going to be there. And even though, like, we've maybe hired one, right? Like so we need to work on that some more. I could say like, oh, well, look at this investment that's coming into Maine with the Rue Institute, and the investors would be like, oh, interesting. I haven't thought about that before. And now if you layer on and think about, well, now we have a life science center and all this other activity, and which, I know MDI Biolabs and Jackson Labs and UMaine are also doing great work, like telling that story. And then also within the global economy, like there's probably places where we will be really good at it. Like all life science isn't created equal, right? So like having a place that has the strategy that where the places we can make bets and be really good at will just accelerate the discussion. So I'm excited about the potential for this.
Awesome. Thank you to all of you. All right, so let's maybe hear from each of you separately a little bit from your individual perspectives. Owen mentioned the creation of the Rue and how that was a pivotal point. I agree with that. So Eileen, ever since you moved to Maine, we've been working together so closely, and I think your big mission is to connect people. And, you're an expert in coupling economic development and higher education. And how do you think a center like this could help with the connection piece?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work to connect organizations, and every organization here has its individual mission. And so if we want to really leverage the potential of those of us together are much greater than the sum of the parts, then somebody or some organization has to really nurture what that looks like. And so while we've done an incredible job in trying to start that organic growth, which I think has been critical. So if we had tried to do this 4 years ago, I don't know if we would have been as successful, because we didn't necessarily have the momentum of the entire ecosystem behind it, right? So we needed that time to nurture those initial connections. But now it's time to really be able to have an organization spend time nurturing those things beyond sort of the individual connections that we very much needed to establish. And I can't even begin to mention how important it is also that this organization is going to be that front door to what Sarah was talking about, the global economy, because that is a whole different audience that we're going to want to bring in and need to bring in. And with that, you want to have a fundraising piece. And so having that front door to that conversation will also be critical, because then you can efficiently be able to let people within the network know what's coming in, what's inbound, how can we maximize those efficiencies. And so I'm super excited to see how the ecosystem has taken things to the next level, to say, okay, now we can advocate at a state level. What does that look like? And have that strategy. So to Sarah's point, a lot of this has been done in other states, and there are many, many documents that have said, okay, for a really strong ecosystem, you need strong higher education, you need strong research, you need individual resources, but what does that look like together, right? So it's sort of like when you're cooking, you have a lot of the ingredients, but the ingredients itself don't make the end result, right? Somebody has to actually cook. And so that's what I'm looking forward for the center.
I love that metaphor about the fact that someone needs to actually cook it as a cook. Okay, thank you so much, Eileen. Sarah, I know you have a lot of experience with centers in other states, and I wanted for you to talk a little bit about what has worked in other states and what's the ROI that the states have seen, and what could that mean for Maine?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the states that have done this most successfully, there are a couple of guiding principles. One is you've got to play a long game. This isn't a fast, couple year investment and you're done. The states that have really won in this sector have made 10, 20, 30, 40-year investments. And the kinds of ROIs that they've seen on those investments have been massive. Right next door from us in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, which is very similar in concept and structure to what this bill would do here in Maine, has had a 19 time ROI on every dollar invested. That's a huge return. In North Carolina, which has an even longer time frame, I think it's like a 72% return on investment for every dollar invested. Those are huge numbers. They don't happen overnight, but when you do this right and you make these long-term strategic investments, they produce a huge amount of jobs and economic output to these markets. One example that I really like is in Worcester. Worcester, I think, has a lot of parallels to Maine in that it lost 20% of its working population when it had a major industry disruption. Sounds similar? I grew up in Bucksport, in a paper mill town. This is a tried and true, story here. And over its 40-year, span of investment, they have seen the life sciences generate over $2 billion to their local economy and create more than 5,000 direct jobs. That's a huge game-changing investment for a place like Worcester. And guess what? That's not Boston. Another thing that I would highlight in terms of best practices, which I think is really important for Maine to get right, is that we're not trying to be Boston. We're never going to be Boston. And a strategy that will work here in the state really needs to build on and invest in Maine's natural strengths. So life sciences in our state looks like things that are coming from our oceans, things that are coming from our forests, things that medical devices and healthcare solutions that are coming out of our hospitals and our rural context of getting healthcare out to our population. Those are the kinds of investments when we say life sciences that will ultimately make us successful, playing to our natural strengths, things that have a reason to be in Maine, a reason to grow here in Maine. So that's another, I think, best practice in terms of what will ultimately make these kinds of investments really successful over time.
Great, thank you. I love all these numbers in Massachusetts and other states and North Carolina. We want to also see a huge ROI in the future. Owen, as a co-founder of a smaller yet very successful company, I wanted you talked a little bit about how you started in Boston and then you moved to Maine because you wanted to be in Maine. But as a founder, what are some biggest challenges that startups face in growing and scaling in Maine, and how can a centralized strategy address those issues?
Well, particularly if you think about life science or medical device, I think Eileen went here. There's a lot of really specific like knowledge bases and skill sets that you need to have. And knowing what really good looks like and like who's done it at the world's best or whatever, like to compete globally. Sometimes like I think we might have a few of them around sometimes, but it's not like you run into them all over the place. And so like identifying and finding in the ecosystem like who's done it at the highest possible level has been hard. We spend a lot of time outside of the state identifying those people, right? Just because it's like we're here, but this person worked with the FDA with exactly the same type of product, and we're going to go find them. But that's a lot of LinkedIn time to go do that. And having and I know in ecosystems like Boston, you almost get plugged into some of those people along the way, right? And so having sort of the density of the talent of the people who have done it at a high level, I think would be really helpful to not have to go search and find it, because that's a challenge to navigate those. On the capital side, I think it's harder in the earlier days and easier as you have proven out some things, because, as you get further along in a business, you're talking more about like what your growth rate looks like and what your revenue looks like and these pieces, and investors can model that, etc. Early days, they want to look at patterns they've seen before that have been successful. And so being able to have a place that can tell stories about successes that have been here, right, that we can access easily, will be helpful for the next generation of entrepreneurs that are coming down the pike here. Customers have been difficult. I mean, I know we have health systems, right, but we have two, and there's a lot of them out there, and there's bigger markets. And like, how do we make sure the companies maybe could pilot here if they're in the right area, but access more broadly the larger markets? I mean, we have sales teams that do that now. And then I think, this is an interesting one. I've talked to like three diagnostics companies in the last 7 days, right? And all of them are early stage, and then all of them need help in all these areas. And I'm like, oh, well, you need to talk to this person about this, and this person about this, and this person about this. And then suddenly they have like 6 conversations they now need to process, right? Like having a more central place, I think would be really helpful for them to get started.
Thank you, Owen. I do see some questions in the chat. Let's just maybe hear from Jerry first. So, Jerry, you represent the research world in Maine. We know there are some world-class research institutes in Maine, but how would a center like this help us? And how does the lack of coordination limit our potential?
Yeah. I'm so excited about this opportunity because, sort of to Sarah's point, for years I've been saying, Maine needs like a marketing strategy for life sciences, because when people come here, that's not what they immediately think about, right? They think about maybe more traditional industries. And so this really requires a mind shift. And I'm excited to see where we are as a state in really starting that process. And these kinds of conversations are so incredibly important as we do that. But one area where I see this center as playing a key role is in filling those gaps. I think we've all just touched on different pieces of that, but from the research side in particular, right? We've talked about the fact that curiosity-driven research is a really long game. And a lot of the questions that we are asking don't have those sort of immediate results that can be marketed. However, they really do form the foundation of, discovery science. And so what we are excited about is connecting with the folks who are looking more, at the end of that pipeline, and how to take those discoveries and actually move them into marketable, either devices or therapies or what have you. And that is not necessarily an inherent area of expertise for curiosity-driven scientists. That's not what they really signed up for, right? They want to kind of do the creative research on the front end, and then their goal would be to sort of transition that out into the private sector. And so I think the more we can do to make that process easier for scientists and for scientific research institutions, and connect more closely with the public sector, like that's incredibly important. Right now, I see there still being a pretty big chasm between those two things here in the state. And I think the more we can do to create opportunities for conversation and collaboration and sharing of resources and sharing of expertise. And so the MDI Biolab has, done a lot to kind of create that backbone in the state of Maine through some of these federally funded networking programs. Something known as the IMBRI program here in Maine connects all of the academic research institutions with our independent research institutions in the state. So there are 17 of them across the state. And, you know, the federal government has made a huge investment in scientific resources and capacity building and workforce training through those programs. So, but there's still a huge gap between how we share those out with the startup community, with, you know, again, the more private sector, and how we connect the workforce, right, the trained workforce that we have with those companies as well, or maybe help them see what the next, you know, the RU is creating some incredible entrepreneurship programs. So it's a logical next step for these undergraduates who complete their, you know, biology degree, for example, and they're wondering, okay, where do I go from here? How do I navigate this? Where is the place for me here in Maine? So the more we can map that out, the better.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, I think there's so much potential, so much talent, and great discoveries happening all across the Maine, but we are a pretty big state, and some of that is very fragmented. So it would be great to see a centralized strategy and coordination of these efforts so we can have a greater potential. All right, I see one question that I want to address in the chat from Jose from Bigelow. So the question is, often it is too easy to compare to Massachusetts by proximity. How do we compare to similar sized states? Any example of success bringing life sciences to the competitive market? I feel like maybe Sarah, you'd like to take that one. And let's talk maybe a little bit about Rhode Island too, if we can.
Yes, so it's a great question, and I'm really glad that you raised it. Rhode Island is a nice example of a much smaller state that also has a benefit, and let's be frank, it could be a challenge of the proximity to Boston, because that's a very strong gravitational pull. And they've just set up a Rhode Island Life Sciences Innovation Hub that has been funded with a $45 million investment from their governor, with a mandate to invest in 3 strategic areas to grow their life sciences ecosystem. One is infrastructure, building a shared lab facility to be able to lower a barrier of entry for those companies that Jerry was talking about, trying to spin out of their leading research institutions, keep them in Rhode Island and not growing to, or, you know, leaving for other better resource markets. 2, funding for those startups. That early startup funding gap is always a big one. And 3, workforce readiness and making sure that the talent is getting invested in and that they're matching those talent needs with the needs of the industry to make sure that they overall are as competitive as possible. The other example that I would give is in Gainesville, Florida, and Eileen and Agnieszka and some others went down and did a trip to look at Gainesville. I really like this example because it's a much smaller market than ours. You're talking about a 10,000 population of 10,000, which is significantly smaller than, you know, the Portland metro area. And it's, a life sciences ecosystem that's been cooking since 1995, and they have massive outputs. They brought together philanthropy, leading research, university, and state and federal funds to invest in this ecosystem over time. And they've, spun out more than 250 companies. They now have a cluster that employs 1,200 life sciences employees. And this is in a context, again, of a 10,000 person metro here. So if you expand that lens, there are really great best practices across all market sizes. We don't need to put $1 billion into this like Massachusetts did. We need to right size our investments and our tactics for what will work here in Maine. But there are really great best practices from cities of all different sizes that we can draw upon and are reflected in this work that Agnieszka and her, all of the partner organizations that contributed to this process have put into this thinking around the Life Sciences Center.
Thanks, Sarah. I love these examples. Okay, Eileen.
I just wanted to build on that. I mean, specifically because we're talking about Gainesville and Jose, you have another question in there about talking about where to invest. And so one of the biggest challenges that I've had since I've come to Maine is everyone says, well, what is it we're doing in life sciences, right? Are we a biopharmaceutical? Because if everyone says that we're talking about being an extension from Boston, what is the focus area? And I personally have not said it is X. And the reason is because it really needs to be driven by the ecosystem, right? So we've really been very disciplined in trying to think about how to create a life sciences ecosystem, in that we haven't indexed on one specific thing yet, because the ecosystem hasn't been nurtured enough to be able to fixate on something yet. And this was only sort of double clicked on by our trip to Gainesville, because they specifically said, we did not pick a specific area that we were going to say, this is where we are going to put our flag, because we didn't know what would be there yet. And so they had a strategy of both talent attraction, but also nurturing their own through University of Florida. And through that helped them define what it is that they were going to support within their incubators. And so that's the other reason why the collaboration that we have with University of Southern Maine and the Rue Institute has become so important. So for those of you who don't know, MTI invested $500,000 in an initiative between USM and the Rue a year ago, such that we could start to use turnkey wet lab space at USM, provide that space to, or I'm not sorry, not provide, but lease that space to companies that are looking for space, as well as it's funding a fee for service biotech labs, so that these companies can engage in accessing that capital equipment they need without actually having to purchase it for their own, as they're trying to establish whether or not there's something there. And so it's these types of pieces that we needed in order to start the flywheel, that I think is only demonstrating how important this next investment is at this time for the state.
Thanks, Eileen. And just to build on that a little bit, so to say you're asking about the specific sectors and what are they, I think this is precisely one of the reasons why we need the center. The center will have a staff and a board, and it will really be up to them to identify those sectors or subsectors in which we should be investing to capitalize on the uniqueness of Maine's life sciences. So thanks for that question. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to go to Owen and talk a little bit about smaller companies and startups that are currently outside of Maine. What does Maine need, or Maine Life Sciences ecosystem need, for those companies to consider coming to Maine? Like, what do you think is lacking? If you talk to some of your friends in the medical device space, maybe in Massachusetts or other states, or maybe eyeing Maine because it has a great lifestyle, but what is lacking for them to actually make that move? Maybe it's on the marketing side, maybe it's on the funding, whatever you think.
There's some like structural and then some related to life science, right? So like I'll cover both, right? So one is early days, I'm thinking early days, they want to come and build it. It's all about the talent you can recruit and bring in, and understanding like who, if you were to, I was just talking with someone, Dana-Farber researcher, thinking about setting up in Maine, and they were like, well, can I recruit the talent that I need? And they actually need shared wet lab space there, right? Like they need space to do the work. Do I have that space? And how do I know I'm going to recruit it? And I actually think I know 30% of Southern Maine is remote workers. I don't know if anyone's ever really characterized that talent, because I've run into people all the time that like are here that I have a hypothesis that would love to work more locally if there was opportunities there. And if there's a way to match that up, I think that would be really helpful for them. I think other founders, there's another like cohort that they're interested in, right? Like, because, you know, I learn more from people that have been about 6 months ahead of me oftentimes than people that, are advising like from later in their careers, just because they're so fresh that they solve the problem that they can like jumpstart it, right? And so that's another piece. The last one that's newer since the last 5 years is just like affordability and housing, and like where are they going to live, and where you're going to. This is a broader unlock for like Maine innovation economy and the Maine economy, but that's something like, if we don't solve that in parallel, right, I think we're going to get stuck. We've done a lot of good work, but we're going to get stuck, and it's going to become less attractive.
Yeah, for sure. Any comments or questions or anything? Oh, Jerry.
Well, I just wanted to build on that again, kind of thinking a little more globally and nationally around that issue, because You know, this is a challenging time for basic science, and there are going to be a lot of transitions in terms of folks maybe leaving federally funded style basic research and moving into industry. And so I think we need to seize that opportunity, recognizing where we are. And that's a really big issue that is critical to this discussion in a lot of different ways. But just one immediate piece that comes to mind is we need to retain whatever talent we can. And the nation is facing the potential of a major brain drain here right now. And so it's really important that we message that opportunities exist, because we are going to be in serious trouble if we don't retain the talent that we currently have. So I would just say that's an opportunity that we need to seize, and seize it quickly.
Thanks, Jerry. Speaking of talent and workforce, maybe Sarah, can you think of some examples of how centers like this address the workforce issue? I know the Massachusetts one is doing a lot of work. So it's not only investing in specific companies, it's also taking care of the workforce piece, which is very much needed in the ecosystem.
That's a great question. I think that happens on a couple of different levels. It could be everything from very practical nuts and bolts training. Like often when folks invest in creating shared lab infrastructure, that space can double as workforce training programs where you come in and you create really entry-level talent opportunities and pipelines for people to come in and learn how to, be lab technicians or work in regulated environments, all the way up to playing that gap identification and strategy role. We hear over and over again, in my position where I meet with people, you talk to industry and they're like, we can't find the talent. And then you talk to the talent and they're like, we are highly qualified and we can't find jobs, or that there's a skills mismatch there. So listening on both sides, understanding the gaps and the opportunities, and then having the resources and the people to actually take action and do something about it. I think one of the things that we struggle with in Maine is we have a lot of plans, but we don't necessarily have the boots on the ground to execute on those plans. And what this center will do is put boots on the ground with the mandate and the resources to be able to actually take action and do something. And that's what we're good at as Mainers. It's like actually just getting our hands dirty and getting it done. And that's, I think, the opportunity that we have within workforce is to first identify those problems and then actually do the work and make the investments to fill those gaps and rapidly iterate. Like, this is not a stagnant environment here. It is changing all of the time. And so it's not a set it and forget it strategy. It's a continuous evolution of test, pivot, and keep that cycle going.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for those examples. Eileen, I know you want to talk about it too, but also as I'm giving you the mic, I wanted for you to talk a little bit about the talent pathways and building those, and how could a center like this help those?
So Sarah actually hit the nail on the head. Those questions are driving everyone crazy. I think one of the things that we've learned here in trying to build this sort of very intentional network is that because we're a smaller state, we have less people, and we do have to be more efficient. And so simply having an organization that can not only assist in identifying what those skills gaps are and who needs what where, they can also help navigate how do we maximize the talent of each of the different organizations to support that talent pipeline? You know what I mean? Instead of everyone chasing after the entire pipeline, there are opportunities. Like, my best case example is the mobile biolab that we have. Many of us are collaborating on with Educate Maine. The mobile biolab was invested in by the congressional delegation and the state several years ago, recognizing the fact that students start to think about their career paths, whether or not it's intentional or not, in the middle school years. If we want students to think about engaging in the life sciences, you want them to be exposed to those opportunities. But given the nature of the way in which the state is geographically organized and the few number of students, the number of minutes that actually go into science education in the K through 12 system is actually rather small. And so how do you assist in trying to bring more of this to that community? So the mobile lab actually goes to rural middle schools all year long, basically introducing students to these types of opportunities. And different groups have participated in making that successful. The RU was very a strong partner in actually putting that grant in, because we actually had the network in order to help facilitate finding out how much it would cost, identifying the right partners to actually get the mobile lab here, so we didn't have to recreate the wheel. At the same time, you probably don't want me out there in the mobile lab engaging with K through 12 students when we have much better people out there to address that audience, right? So it's that type of partnership that we can really leverage to make things more successful. And a center like this will be able to help people navigate things and bring us all into sort of much more harmony as opposed to being disconnected.
Thanks, Eileen. The mobile biolab is really amazing. Kudos to everybody who worked on it. And it's in its second year of operations, going all around Maine. So if you see it, honk. Okay, I do want to talk a little bit about funding. So there are different models to fund something like this. We are initially asking for, well, $2 million for the first year, which is somewhat modest, but we also understand that the fiscal environment is pretty tight right now, and there are a lot of needs that need to be met. So the vision isn't necessarily for the state of Maine to just keep funding it. We're envisioning it as a public-private entity, and the center would have an ability to raise its own funds through either philanthropy or grants or federal funding, all sorts of ways it can get funded. So I wanted to ask Jerry a little bit about some opportunities in terms of federal funding, and how are we missing out right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Agnieszka, and thank you for asking it. I think, the federal, let's just take NIH as one example, right? National Institutes of Health. So, a big goal for the National Institutes of Health is to make sure that the research enterprise is representative of the population. And so we know that rural states like Maine aren't necessarily as robust in their biomedical research capacity as many of the other states we've talked about, Massachusetts, California, all of those places. And so how do we ensure that that national enterprise is representative of the population? So there is a program known as the Institutional Development Award at NIH, the IDEA program, and it exists specifically to help rural states like Maine. So there are 23 states plus Puerto Rico that are eligible for this program. And that is the program that has been funding this kind of backbone that I mentioned, this INBRE program, for now 25 years here in the state of Maine. And so it has recruited and retained 50 scientists across the state, and it has trained more than 3,000 undergraduate students in hands-on biomedical research. So it is creating sort of, again, this capacity building initiative that is designed to foster more research activity across the state. So that program offers a number of other ways that you can sort of increase research capacity. And there are programs there designed specifically to connect that, basic research component with the more private sector piece. So how do we foster greater output of that research enterprise and see it result in startup companies and more marketable products that come out of that work? And so there are some federal programs there that help with these kind of incubator style entities that can foster more of that activity. I think a couple of times we were contacted by folks at the IDEA program saying, we really need applicants from Maine. We don't have anybody applying for these programs. And so I think now that we are beginning to come together as a sector and think more strategically about how we can leverage what we have, those kinds of programs are going to be essential in fostering, that continued growth of our sector. And I'll just say one other piece on the funding side is, we all know that Maine is attractive, especially seasonally, right, to residents who come here for a portion of the year. And I'll speak specifically about Mount Desert Island. So we have probably the largest concentration of billionaires for 3 months out of the year, as just about any state in the country. And a lot of those folks are very actively involved in venture investment. But in talking with a number of them, they just don't think about Maine as a place where that investment is possible. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity to begin to market. And again, it gets back to that mind shift. It gets back to when I talk to them, they were like, well, we'd love to invest in more in Maine companies, but we just don't know. We don't see any, we don't know where those opportunities lie. And so that's on us, right? We need to do more to make those opportunities really visible for people. And again, it gets back to that kind of marketing piece that we need. And to be able, this entity that we are talking about could really fill that essential role.
Thanks, Jerry. Nice little fact about Mount Desert Island. I think let's segue to Owen, since you've dealt with different venture capitalists and billionaires before. I wanted to know what your vision is. For those of you who don't know, Owen announced a couple weeks ago that he will be running for the position of Maine's governor, and we're very excited that a member of our community is in the race, and we wish you all the best, Owen. So I wanted to ask you, what is your vision for Maine's innovation economy, and how could a center like this help propel that vision?
Yeah, thanks for that. And so, I mean, obviously I love Maine. I think it's a great place. As I think about how we drive prosperity and also quality of life and affordability for people in Maine, I think innovation economy is really important for that, because these are these are companies that bring new dollars into the state at a high level that then get spent on services and other things in the state, they help out, they build things, they buy things, all of these things. And so I think it's really important to help raise prosperity. For example, I mean, 10,000 jobs at $100,000 average job in the life science industry is a great industry, bringing prosperity into the state. So my vision is we would have multiple different types of industry sectors where there might be a focus. Life science would be one of them that could be really strong, where we can build a strategy that we outperform the country. And then also create the conditions for success around that. I hinted at housing, right? We need to build more housing. We're in an AI revolution. How do we make sure that our people are ready to be resilient within that? How do we make sure that their talent wants to stay here? How do we make sure there's a whole list of other things that are creating the conditions that need to be there. And then, so I think if we double down on some areas where we can outperform, and I think other ones to think about are they're obvious in nature, but if you do that, you have to do them well, advanced forest products. Maybe I'm calling it American resilience or boat building, right? I think there's a big area that we could expand there in the state. And then if you think about the Life Science Center and say, well, this is a place that drives strategy, and then strategy could help inform investment both from the state and private sector. It could also help inform what we need to educate our K through 12 kids in if they want to come through and they want to work in this industry. And it also can help bring together mentors so that we have the talent density. And I just see this whole stack of things that could come out from having a strategy with a life science center that I don't think we could have done 10 years ago, because the critical mass wasn't here. We have now 10,000 jobs in a lot of institutions that it's an exciting time to have a plan versus emerging strategy in the sector.
Thanks so much, Owen. Yeah, I agree with all of that. And hopefully the 10,000 jobs in a couple of years will be 20,000 jobs, and then 30, and then 40, and then we'll see a huge workforce here.
I mean, to that point, right? If you think of these jobs, I call them traded jobs, not trade jobs, but they're jobs that bring dollars into the state. I don't know the exact number, but it's small of the people that work in the state. It's 150, 200,000. I have to get the exact number. If you add 10,000 jobs in the life sciences, right? Like that's a huge jump as a percentage of those type of jobs. You're like bending the GDP curve of the state like heavily, which is then has all these other benefits to it. So like that would be really exciting.
Yeah. And also, oh, and you mentioned the workforce that's working remote, and when we're saying 10,000 jobs, we're not counting those workers. So hopefully we can tap into that talent if we create more opportunities for them, and that number will immediately go up.
And Agnieszka, I'd add one more thing about jobs, which is looking at Rhode Island and their investment in the Rhode Island Life Sciences Hub. They're aiming to double the amount of jobs they have in the life sciences within 5 years. So that is the goal that they have set coming out of that investment that they have made. So we're talking about transformational change with these kinds of investments.
Yeah. And I think a couple of you touched on marketing. I think that's a huge piece for Maine. And Jerry, you mentioned that, some people who could potentially invest don't necessarily see Maine as a place to invest. So I think that change is definitely needed, and that will be a huge piece of it. Okay, we are 9 minutes away from 1 o'clock. So let's maybe wrap up a little bit. And now that we all know we got a unanimous vote among the committee members, now we'll have the state Senate and House of Representatives actually voting on this bill. So if a legislator came to you and said, why should I vote yes on this? Why do we need another institution? Don't we have enough? Why do we need to grow life sciences if it's already growing? What would you say to them in one sentence, or maybe two? Whoever wants to start. Jerry.
I'll jump in and just say, I would say that this is a unique moment for Maine and we need to seize it with both hands, right? So this is a wonderful opportunity to leverage the investment that has been made in Maine's life science sector over the last 25 years and really take it to the next level. And that's what we need for the state.
Thanks, Jerry. Sarah?
I would say make this investment in Maine's future. We have an opportunity to take all of the R&D that is happening in our world-class institutions and change it into startups, into jobs, and into future-proof industries that are going to give our kids a reason to stay and build their lives here in Maine. I've got a toddler, I want opportunities and prosperity here in the state for this next generation.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other voices?
Well, I mean, I think I can't repeat what everyone said but I think actually Owen had the best statement about the fact that it's time to move us from an emerging economy to, I don't even remember the right word.
Like a merging strategy to a planned strategy.
Yeah. I mean, he was right on, right? Because we couldn't have done this before. We are ready, and there is no better time, and they must do this, period. I think it's really important.
Thanks, Eileen. Oh, and any closing thoughts?
No, I just appreciate all the hard work of BioME and everyone in the industry. I think it's been really impressive over the last bit of time, and it's exciting we're at this point.
Thanks so much. Okay, if anybody has questions, now would be a great time to ask them. Think of your question. If you have one, you can either put it in the chat or just raise your virtual hand. In the meantime, I just wanted to take a moment and just thank the BioMaine Advocacy Committee for all their hard work. The very spontaneous meetings I called with zero notice to make some decisions, and also to our wonderful advocacy consultants, Dana O'Brien and from BioHarbor Strategies, as well as Clara McConnell and Mike Sexel at Main Street Solutions. We've been working with them for a while, and their professionalism and just dedication to this case has really paid off. And I couldn't be more lucky to work with other people, if that made sense. Okay, any questions? I think we covered a lot of ground today. Okay, so I also wanted just to mention some upcoming events. We keep oh, sorry, 1 second. We keep organizing events. You may be familiar with some of them. So if you're interested, we have 2 of them coming up. One is on May the 13th. We had Jerry from MDA Biolab talk today. If you'd like to actually see the campus, we will be going to Bar Harbor. We have a bus going from Portland. It will likely stop on the way to Bar Harbor, or you can just drive up. We'll also be touring Jack's. This event is for members and partners only. So if you are within a member organization and interested in this, please contact us. We have just a few tickets left. And then everybody's favorite event is coming on June the 3rd, Women in Bioscience. It will be at Bissell Brothers in Portland. It's a really fun one, and registration's open. If you're interested, just head over to our website and register. Other than that, we'll keep you posted. We send advocacy alert emails all the time. There will definitely be one going after this, after what happened today, and we'll keep you posted on the progress. I think now it'll be very important to talk directly to our policymakers and just educating them on what this bill is, why it's needed, and the potential impact on Maine's economy. All right, thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your sunny day. Hope it's sunny where you are.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
to all.
everyone.